It's my pleasure to introduce the speakers for this morning's session. And our first speaker is Maria Klawe. She became the Harvey Mudd College's 5th president in 2006. A renowned mathematician, computer scientist, and scholar, Klawe is the first woman to lead the college since its founding in 1955. Prior to joining Harvey Mudd, she served as Dean of Engineering and Professor of Computer Science at Princeton University. Klawe has made significant research contributions to and held numerous leadership roles in the area of mathematics and computer science. She received her PhD in 1977 and her Bachelor of Science in '73 in mathematics from the University of Alberta. Please join me in welcoming Maria.
Good morning. Now, I worked for IBM for a number of years, and you start a meeting and you go, good morning, and then everyone says it at the top of their voice back at you, good morning. Okay, one more time, good morning. Good morning. That was it, thank you. Okay, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. I think it's my first time at the Supercomputing conference. And I'm here to talk to you about diversity and inclusion in supercomputing. And, to tell the truth, I have not worked on increasing diversity or inclusion in supercomputing. I've worked broadly across mathematics, engineering, computer science in terms of increasing diversity. But I have a hypothesis that I think will apply to the supercomputing field if this is something you want to do. So, I'm going to talk about, from my perspective, why diversity and inclusion matters. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our journey at Harvey Mudd, and specifically talking a bit about making the computer science and engineering majors accessible and engaging for all of our students. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think might apply to supercomputing. So, from my perspective, there are 3 reasons why it's really important that we get more women and more people of color to go into every field of computer science, and engineering for that matter. So the first one is, I think we all know about the demand that every country has today for people with computer science and supercomputing knowledge and skills. And it's very unlikely we're going to meet that demand if we don't figure out a way to entice women and people of color to enter these fields. The second reason is more of an equity reason. These are, at least in my experience, really great jobs. If you think about what data analytics, big data, is doing to every aspect of society today, whether we're talking about healthcare or talking about climate change, clean energy, any of these kinds of things, supercomputing and computer science, software engineering, big data, machine learning is going to play key roles in resolving these issues. And these jobs, they're highly paid. If you like to travel, and I heard lots of French where I was sitting there, clearly this particular conference brings a lot of people from all over the world to come to it. If you'd like to make a difference in the world, and also if you want flexible careers for those of you who, like me, would like to have had children, as well as an ambitious career, these are great jobs. And so I'd really love to see more women and more African Americans, Hispanics, and people from all around the world have access. But the biggest reason for me is when you have a diverse team that's working a problem, you get a better solution. And it can be diversity because of different cultures, different countries. It can be diversity because of gender. It can be diversity because of race or faith or sexual orientation. But you simply get better solutions. And as we know, our world has a lot of problems facing it right now. And I personally would like to make sure that we have the best teams who are working on those issues. Okay. So raise your hand if you had heard about Harvey Mudd College before today. Okay, that's pretty good, actually. It's much better than I usually get. Harvey Mudd is a tiny science and engineering liberal arts college 800 students, 100 faculty, 7 departments. It's a little bit less tiny because it's one of 7 academic institutions in Claremont that are known as the Claremont Colleges. We're one of the 5 undergraduate colleges. We happen to be the science and engineering, so we're known as the nerds or the geeks or the dorks, depending on your particular terminology for people like us. Our students are spectacular. If any of you have PhD programs, you want our graduates in your PhD programs. We compete with MIT, Caltech, and Stanford for students. And we're a very different kind of institution for a science and engineering college. Every student believes that it is their responsibility to help everyone else succeed. We emphasize collaboration from day one. We also really work hard on having our students learn to write well and speak well as work well in teams and all those kinds of things. And we recruit our faculty. Every single faculty member at MUD cares more about the mission of the college and educating our students than their own career. That is very unusual. It certainly was not the case at Princeton. It was not the case at the University of British Columbia, and it's not the case at any of the institutions that we compete with. But it is the case at MUD. We're also incredibly expensive. It's embarrassing that we are now, for 2 years in a row, the most expensive college in the United States. We're expensive because we're very high touch. We have mostly small classes, except for computer science, because like everyone else, we're being overrun in our computer science major. Our students do very well after they graduate. Typically about 30 to 35% get a PhD in science or engineering at some point. We're second only to Caltech in that measure. And we have been either 1 or 2 in terms of return on investment for the last 5 years. Even though we're very expensive, about 3/4 of our students receive some financial aid, and they earn high salaries after graduation. So we were founded in 1955. There was an argument between the president, the founding president, Joe Platt, who was a physicist, and the trustees. The trustees wanted it to be a male college. Joe wanted it to be co-ed. One of the trustees said to Joe, "Who'd ever marry a female mathematician?" Well, I take that sort of personally. But anyway, Joe said, "I did," and it was true. He had married a female mathematician, Jean. And the trustees reluctantly allowed that there could be women, but there had to be a cap on the percentage of students who could be women. The cap was 11%. 11? Why would you pick 11? But, it really was not much of an issue for the first few years. There were typically, less than 5% female students, 1 or 2 in an incoming class. But in 1971, I guess they were getting close to 11%, so they removed the cap. So this is a photograph from the early days. It's some kind of complicated bicycle race, but as you can see, pretty much everyone you see is male. So I'm very happy to say that the previous president, John Strauss, to me, really started the work on trying to attract more women, both as students and faculty, and more students of color. And so he started as president in 1997, and if you look at the percentage of female faculty and the percentage of students who are female, you'll see that faculty has gone steadily up every 10 years. From starting at around 20, it's now at around 40%, and students have gone, it was about 30% when I arrived in 2006, and now it's close to 50-50. When I say close, remember we're really small. We have incoming classes of maybe 210 or 215 students, and we could be 47%, we could be 52% female. We're generally someplace in that range. As Bill said, I'm the first female president after 50 years. Thank you. So, I'll just say I've been the first female in my role for the last almost 30 years. So, it wasn't such a big deal for me. It was definitely a big deal for Harvey Mudd, though. In our first 50 years, So we have 7 departments. We had 2 instances when there was a female department chair. Last year, 3 of our 7 department chairs were female. And this year, 6 of the 7. And you know, what's really cool about this is I didn't have anything to do with it. We didn't tell departments that they needed to have female department chairs. It just came as a natural consequence of all of the work we've been doing around diversity and inclusion, trying to make sure we don't have bias in our recruiting, our promotion, and in selecting department chairs. And so we now have, every department has had a female department chair. We have our first ever female department chairs in engineering, chemistry, physics, computer science, and maths. So it's pretty impressive. Now, we've also been working hard on race. And I'm Canadian A. Do we have any Canadians here? Oh my goodness, that is a tiny number of Canadians. So when you grow up in Canada, the whole issue of African Americans and Hispanics is just not an issue there. But I'm now also have been for 7 years also an American citizen. And having spent about half my career in the United States, I have, of course, learned that this is a huge issue in terms of equity and access to education. So, as I mentioned, the previous president had worked really hard on trying to increase the racial diversity of both our faculty and our students. But even so, when I arrived in 2006, the percentage of students who were African American hovered between 1% and 2%. Hispanic was about 5%. Native American was, at Pacific Islander, was about 1%. When I arrived, it was probably about 4% international. We're typically about 25% Asian American, and the rest, Caucasian, has been steadily decreasing since about 2006. And I give you the numbers here from in the first year class starting in 2012 to 2015 and 2016, and you'll see we made a really dramatic increase from 2 to roughly 10% African American, from 5 to about 20% Hispanic, and similar numbers elsewhere. So, you know, many people look at this and they say, oh my goodness, I mean, we're now one of the most racially diverse colleges in the country, which is really surprising for a quote unquote elite science and engineering school. But it's not enough to get them in the door. What you really have to do is you have to make sure that the experience, once they're there, is one that is going to help them thrive. Not just say, oh, you're so lucky to come to Harvey Mudd, you know, you grew up in an urban ghetto, whatever, you know. It's just not that way. You have to actually make sure that the environment you're putting people in is one in which they can do well. And the thing I will say about being at Harvey Mudd, and I love being at Harvey Mudd, it's my favorite place ever, is that if you've been largely white and male for 50 years, if you're a female or if you're a black student or you know, a Hispanic student, the culture and the environment is not one that feels quite as comfortable to you as white males. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. So one example is, we have gotten a lot of press, particularly around having so many women in computer science and engineering and physics. And a couple of years ago, some of our senior female students in those fields mentioned that we got all this press, but they weren't having as good as an experience as the male students. And I sort of went, okay, tell us about it. Well, so for example, in both the physics and engineering seminar series, every single speaker was a white male. Usually an older white male, because the person who was running the series was an older white male and was inviting his friends. In engineering, we have positions called proctors for the machine shop and for various labs and so on. And these are the students who had been trained highly on how to run the complex machines, and they're there to help other students learn how to run them. One of the students, who is a female proctor, says, you know, they'll never let me tell them how, the white men will never let me tell them how to run a machine. Because they just say, you're a girl, you couldn't possibly know how to do this. These are small examples, but when it happens over and over again, there is a sense of lack of belonging. Let me talk a little bit about faculty racial diversity. First of all, it's much slower. Students come and go. They're with you for roughly 4, maybe 5 years, and then they're gone. Faculty tend to stay at Harvey Mudd, as far as I can tell, for at least 30 years. And so we have one who's been there for 46. So it's slower, but we've been making fairly steady progress, largely because we're training our faculty search committees on how to recruit a diverse pool of applicants, how to interview diverse applicants so that they'll have a good experience. And what we've noticed is that the moment we take our eye off the ball, we hire all white males. It's just so interesting. I mean, it's just, and I think it's, no matter how alert you are, we all have a bias towards favoring who we see as the dominant group in a discipline. Okay, so I have a hypothesis about supercomputing, and that's that if you make the environment supportive and engaging for all, if you build confidence and community among your underrepresented groups, and if you demystify the path to success, a highly diverse population will come, thrive, and succeed. And this is, of course, what we have been doing at Harvey Mudd across all areas of science and engineering and mathematics. And I have absolutely no reason to think it would be different for supercomputing as a highly interdisciplinary field where, you know, as the movie about SC17 showed, it really matters. This is solving huge problems, making the connections, creating the knowledge. And what we have found is that women and students of color, people of color, love to work in areas where there's challenge, there's rigor, and where the work you do actually makes a difference. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through what's involved in making an undergraduate experience engaging and supportive. And I don't think it's that hard to think about how you translate it to PhD programs or to research labs and so on. The first thing you want to make sure is your incoming students, independent of prior experience, feel that they belong. And one of the things that we have found in many introductory courses, either in math or in computer science or in physics, that we have students arriving with very different levels of prior experience. You know, so for example, we will have a student who's been programming since they were 8. And perhaps has taken a full year of computer science, or 2 years of computer science for that matter, at their local university before they enter Harvey Mudd. But the majority of our students will actually arrive never having written a line of code. And this is true for actually most students in the United States, because there are very few computer science teachers in our high schools. This is something we're trying to rectify, but it's still true. So I'm going to call Liz up on stage. I usually use a male, but I'm going to use Liz this time because she's somebody I actually know, and this is Liz Jessup. Now, you're going to pretend to be a geeky male.
Okay.
Okay. So Liz is a young male student who loves computer science and has been programming since a tender age, and she's in my introductory computer science class. And I love Liz. I mean, she's such a good student. She's so passionate. She asks all the questions and she answers all the questions. But the problem about this is Liz knows so much that most of the other students in the class think that they shouldn't be there because they don't know as much as she does. So we happen to refer to this as macho behavior, and we get rid of it through a number of ways. One is we separate sections by prior experience, but the other one, even when you do that, you're going to have some students like Liz who just know more. So this is how we address it. I meet with Liz one-on-one in office hours, and I say, Liz, I love having you in my class. You love computer science, you know so much, it's just wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
And then I say, but Liz, you probably don't realize it, that when you answer questions and ask questions, the other students in the class feel really intimidated because of how much you know. So I would love to continue our conversations, but just do them one-on-one in office hours. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Liz. I mean, it's really surprising. It works. Another thing we know about women and people who are underrepresented in other areas is they're often less likely to ask for help. And the reason is, if you're like me, a female mathematician or computer scientist, you've gone through most of your life having people just not really have high expectations for your technical knowledge. And I will say, even when you get old and you're the president of a college, that doesn't really change much. So I, in particular, am very reluctant to ask for help because that would make me even more vulnerable. Here I am, the first woman president, the first woman dean of engineering at Princeton, blah, blah, blah. And if I need help, it makes me seem like I'm not as competent as I should be. Well, we found out this is true for many of our students and for many adults at all kinds of levels in their careers. So one of the things we work hard to do is set the expectation that asking for help and hard work are much more important for success than any quote-unquote natural ability. We emphasize collaboration, we provide lots of support. In our intro CS class, we have we actually have more than 2 sections, but I'll talk about it as 2 for a moment. We have a black section and a gold section. Those are the Harvey Mudd colors. The gold section is for the students with no prior experience. The black section is for the students who've typically had a year of computer science in high school. And then we have another section altogether that's for the kids who've got way too much. That would be the Liz person experience. It's called 42, and those of you who've read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe will understand the choice of that number. What we tell the students in CS5 Gold, those are the ones with no prior experience, that by the time they finish that course, they will be at the same level of preparation to take the next course in the series as the ones who were in black. Now you might say, but the ones in black already had a full year of computer science. How do you do that? It's a 1-semester course. How do you get the people with no prior experience to the same place as people who came in with a lot more experience? Well, the trick is that the people who teach CS5 Black, they've got to add some extra material because they wouldn't have enough, to consume a semester's worth of work. But they make sure that that extra material is interesting, fascinating, has nothing to do with the content in the next 2 courses in the sequence. So it's not that they're not learning something valuable, it's just that we're being very careful not to privilege them when they start the next course. And then the final thing is, my experience is both in computer science and engineering and physics. If you walk up to someone and say, oh, you'd be a great CS major or a great engineer, if they're female or if they're someone who comes from a cultural background where they don't think that's going to be a good match for them, just because you tell them that, it's not going to make it happen. What you do instead is you say, just take the next course, because that's not such a huge investment. And typically, what we know is once they've taken 2 courses or maybe the 3rd course, they're going like, I can do this. I'm actually good at it. And I can get great summer jobs because I'm doing this. And we keep on doing that throughout the undergraduate experience. So we make sure that the second course in the sequence is engaging and supportive, and that everybody is encouraged to work hard and they will be successful. It's also very important to give early either internship or research experiences to students. We know from research that women and people of color are more likely to stay in a major if they can have an early experience that shows them why what they're working on actually matters in the world. We take students to conferences with diverse attendees. So, for example, for computer science, we typically take between 40 to 60 students to the Grace Hopper Celebration of Women in Computing conference. That's a lot of students. We're usually, depending on what city the conference is, we have the largest number of attendees, or we have the second largest number of attendees from a university or college. We do that because we know that when we actually bring them, whether they're going to major in CS or in physics or chemistry, biology, just being around 10,000 women, technical women who are clearly doing really well in their field, loving what they're doing, is a huge confidence boost to our women, because they're going to graduate in some technical field, and it really doesn't matter to them that this is a computer science conference versus an engineering conference. But we also send our black engineering students, or in fact all of our black students, a large percentage of our black students, I should say, to NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers. We send our Hispanic students to SPLS. We send our female engineering students to SWE, and so on. And then we work very hard about this idea of building community and having lots of role models who can demonstrate that you can be Hispanic or black or female and still do really well. Okay, so what applies to supercomputing? Well, as I said before, if you think hard about these three things, let me illustrate one thing that is very unhelpful. Suppose you have a course that most of the people, let's say it's a graduate course, let's say it's a very rigorous, challenging course. And let's suppose that the way your graduate students talk about this course is, that's the course whether you find out whether you really belong in this PhD program or not. It's going to be really tough, and a fair number of people won't make it. That's the worst possible way to frame a course, because what you're doing when you say something like that is you're basically taking the people with the least confidence and undermining their confidence. If instead you say, this is a really rigorous course, it's really exciting, it's really interesting, it's going to take a lot of hard work to do well in this course, but the people who work hard and ask for help are going to do well. That takes away a lot of the impact of how much confidence you have, because even when you lack confidence, you can still work hard. The part about demystifying the path to success goes like this. If I'm a member of a dominant group, I will be picking up all kinds of cues about what I need to do to be successful just by hanging out, whether it's going for beer on Friday afternoons, or if we were playing golf, for executives. There are all kinds of opportunities for people who are part of the dominant group to, without even realizing it, learn things that the people who are not part of the dominant group will not learn. So this whole idea of demystifying the path for success, you don't need to do it just for your women or people of color. You do it for everyone. So for example, one of the things that the Computing Research Association's Committee on the Status of Women has done for probably about 25 years now is they run a half-day or one-day workshop about getting yourself established in an academic career. It's for people towards the end of their PhD program, people in a postdoc, people who've just started as an assistant professor. And it's all of the really perhaps to many people boring, but for new assistant professors, extremely important things such as getting your teaching off to a good start, successfully getting a research grant proposal submitted and granted, hopefully, figuring out how to combine your personal life with the expectations at work, understanding how your department decides and how your institution decides on who gets tenure. All of these sort of basic things. And we've seen this particular workshop is not just for women, it's for men as well. And we found that it's being really helpful to everybody. So it's not doing special things just for your underrepresented groups. It's things that will help every single person who's in your community benefit. Okay, so some specific recommendations. One of the best things you can do if you really want to attract more graduate students with diverse backgrounds, diverse cultures, more women, more people of color into your PhD programs is to give them a summer research experience in your group, whether you're at a national lab or a university, a company. And what we've found out is that this may sound sort of bizarre, but that one of the best times to recruit these students is at the end of either their first year in college or university or their second year. And the reason is, first of all, they have very few other opportunities. Now, I've been giving this talk a lot, so Intel, Microsoft, Facebook, and Google all now have early internship programs for exactly this reason. So they have more opportunities than they had a couple of years ago, 10 years ago. But it's still true that on balance, people tend to think, between the junior and senior year, that's a good time for somebody to do a research experience. Well, chances are if they do a research experience between their first and their second year, you'll have a way better chance of recruiting them back to do another summer with you. And what we know is that having a really positive experience makes them much more likely to do a PhD and, of course, much more likely to apply to a department where they've already had a great experience. The next one is about really working hard to get a much more diverse faculty within your institution, whatever institution that is, or diverse researchers if you're in a research lab. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about how to recruit a more diverse pool and how to interview. So, been numerous studies that show that we are all biased. So, for example, I'm sure many of you saw the papers that were written about a study where scientists, I believe these were biologists in this particular case, with an equal number of female and male faculty members, were given one of two resumes. Now, the two resumes were identical. The only difference was that some of them, the first name of the student was Jonathan, and some of them, the first name of the student was Jennifer. Now, you know what happens, right? Both male and female faculty rated Jonathan more highly than Jennifer. They were willing to pay Jonathan more than they would pay Jennifer to work in their lab. And the difference between males and females in terms of, basically, there was no statistical significance based on the gender of the faculty person. Similarly, MIT, when they were trying to recruit more women into their faculty, they had the following: their faculty members would typically call leaders in their field at other universities to ask if they had some outstanding PhD students who were due to graduate soon or had recently graduated. Both males and females, when they're asked, would primarily come up with the names of white males. But they found that if they, after saying thank you for those names, if they added an extra prompt, which was, and we're particularly interested in women and students of color, do you have any outstanding female or students of color who are going to graduate soon? that prompt was enough for them to actually come up with several names of people that they didn't come up with the first time. Now, this is not because human beings are evil. It's not deliberate. It's completely unconscious. And we all do it, even when we're aware that's an issue. And it's just part of our growing up in a culture. If you grow up in a culture where all doctors are female, you tend to think that doctors are going to be female. If you grow up in a culture where all police people are male, you tend to think that police people will be male, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the most important things that we educate our search committees on doing is, you don't just post an ad someplace, you actually reach out and you ask people. We also encourage people to get to know, let's suppose you had an undergraduate student, this is a very Canadian phenomenon, who went and did her PhD in physics at Stanford or Harvard or something like that. If that female student was an undergraduate at your institution, you should be tracking them for when they're actually going to complete their PhD, because you're going to have at least a reasonable shot of inviting them back to give a talk and perhaps persuading them they should apply for your faculty position. So this is not something you do sort of at the last moment. This is something where you deliberately keep an eye on potential candidates you'd be interested in over a multi-year period. Okay, now you've actually managed to you have a diverse pool, you have a number of female or candidates of color who are interviewing for your faculty position. One of the things that is really not a good idea is not allow a female candidate to interact with any women graduate students or faculty. And if you happen to have an all-male department, pull in some women from your graduate program or from another department. Because one of the things that people who are from a diverse group want to know when they're interviewing for something is this going to be a comfortable place for me? Am I going to have a sense of belonging? And if you don't have any of that kind of person in your department already, it's going to be very hard for you to convince them that it is a great place. But it is something that somebody who comes from a similar background is going to be able to convince them that this could be a very good place for them to be. At least in the United States and in Canada, there are questions that are illegal to ask. It doesn't seem to stop people from asking them, such as, are you married? Are you planning on having children? Do you have a partner who also needs a job? These are all illegal within North America to ask those questions. And so you need to make sure that when you're setting up the interview experience, that the people who are going to be interacting with candidates really understand that you can't answer those questions. Obviously, if you want more diverse students to enter your PhD program, you should be particularly recruiting at institutions that have diverse student body. And one of the best ways to recruit is go do a sabbatical there so that you'll get to know the community. Or run your summer research experience and recruit students from there. The next one I'm going to recommend is perhaps controversial, but I think if we're really going to make progress, it's got to start happening. We need funding agencies, so that would be the National Science Foundation, DARPA, NIH in the United States. Be sure you know the similar organizations within your own country. We need to start asking for information on the diversity of the student body and what the institution is doing to increase the diversity of the student body. Because what I have learned is that the single easiest way to get institutions to change is to tie funding to actually making progress. And here in the United States, Title IX has been incredibly effective in getting more athletic programs for women. It's also having some impact on sexual assault. We need to do this for research funding as well. And then the final thing I would say is make sure that every single thing you do within your community, whether it's the videos you make or the speakers that you invite, the members of your program committees, have a diverse representation. Because this may only be true for the women in the audience, but I certainly know that there are many, many instances where I've been given a list of prospective speakers, let's say 40, for keynotes. Okay, how many of those 40 are going to be female? Well, if there was a female on the group that prepared the list, maybe 5. If there wasn't, it will be 0, 1, 2, or 3. And you know, it gets sort of tiring to be the person who's constantly saying, why don't you have more women on your list? And the answer is always, well, there just really aren't enough women who have the qualifications that we're looking for in this. And then, of course, since it's in my field, I'll say, well, what about Jennifer, and what about Laura, and what about Liz, and what about Fan, and what about et cetera, et cetera. And then they'll start out by saying, no, that's not really, they're very good, but they're not really quite what we were thinking about. Then you push a little bit harder, and of course, eventually you end up with whatever, 8, 10 of the 40 being female. It gets really tiring to be the female who's arguing for women. If you're black, it gets very tiring to be the black person. So what the biggest message I would like each of you to take away is, this is the responsibility for everyone, not just for the members of underrepresented groups. And we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Right. So we have microphones. I see we have a few people already up at them. Why don't you go ahead?
This is Siamak Tavalai, Microsoft. Thank you very much for giving us a number of tools to actually help recruit a diverse workforce. Of course, bringing diversity through inclusiveness is great. Having these tools is great to bring people in. But would you also please enlighten us, telling us how, by putting this diverse workforce to work, projects get solved faster, bigger problems perhaps can be resolved, and we entangle some of the issues that we have in our projects in society and elsewhere.
Thank you. So it's definitely been my experience working on research groups, working on teams to accomplish various kinds of things, that when you have diverse perspectives, you get rid of the blind spots that you often have when you have a group of people who come with the same set of experiences. And so, you know, I think one of the things that happens is that when you have people who are just seeing whatever it is you're doing through a different lens, they will have ideas, but they'll also have, they'll find problems with the approach that you're actually taking. And that's incredibly valuable.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm kind of happy to hear about some of the policies you put into effect. I can count a number of times in grad school where I was told I don't belong there, and I'm the quintessential white male. But my question comes more down to the fact that comes on more to the fact of in academia, there's this certain kind of discrimination where academics think that the ultimate form of success is to be another academic. Now, in fact, your example of one of the things you were doing was, you know, oh, we're going to help prepare you know, people to become better professors or that. But I mean, for a lot of careers, that's not possible. I have a background in physics, and if you look at the AIP or APS surveys, they show that the majority of people that do get a PhD in physics don't end up being professors because there's just not enough positions. So my question is how do you emphasize success in industry as opposed to academia?
Oh, great question. So the first thing I would say is that I spent 8 years working for IBM Research. It was a great experience. I was fairly early in my career. I really benefited both from the chance to really focus on research. I had both my kids while I was working for IBM Research before I went back to academia. And there's just no question to me that you can today do things in industry that are just as compelling, as interesting, as important as in academia. So by no means do I want to say that an academic career is the right thing for everyone. One thing I would say, however, is that we really need female and people of color as role models as faculty members. So, I would like to encourage departments to try to work hard on having diverse faculty, but I don't in any way want to imply that having a career in industry with either a startup or an NGO or any of those kinds of things are any less compelling or important to the world.
Hi, Jeff Hollingsworth, University of Maryland. Wanted to ask, you noted that it's important to have women and other underrepresented groups on search committees and involved, but on the other hand, that can place an undue burden on those folks, and how do you balance the important need to have them represented on search committees with not hindering their careers by over-asking them to serve?
That's also a great question, and it certainly is true that if you are a person of color or female, your service on many committees, you will have many more opportunities to serve on committees. So the first thing I would say is that it's important for department chairs and deans to actually try and pay attention to this. And if you are, it's often very helpful if for example, you have a female who's doing a lot of the work around diversity, you could actually give that person a title like the Associate Department Chair for Diversity and give them a teaching release for that. Often we just expect the members of underrepresented groups to put more time in trying to change the culture of the institution than others. And I think the appropriate thing to do is, if that is happening, first of all, encourage many of the highly represented groups to become champions, because it shouldn't be just the underrepresented groups. But then also, if somebody is doing an excessive amount of work, provide some kind of recognition for that, both with title and with teaching release.
Well, thank you. Let's thank Maria again.